All right, well, Joe, thank you for sitting down with me, Assessor Joe Kral. And so we're going to talk. You don't have a challenger this election, so
Correct.
the idea.
Nobody wants my job. Nobody does. I mean, really, it's not.
The idea we had was instead is kind of use this to talk about the process of assessing properties and how it goes from your job to the property tax bill that people get in their mail. So first, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Where'd you grow up? Siblings, parents, things like that?
I'm an only child. I grew up in South Holland. Actually started in Markham to South Holland. Lived there, went to Thornwood High School. Graduated in '86. Long story short, I went to school for journalism and political science. I wanted to be Mike Royko, who was a writer for the Chicago Tribune and Sun-Times. The reality was, while I was in college, one of my professors was a good friend of mine, and he's like, well, why are you doing this? Because the media itself is in its downward spiral, and as it planned out, we don't really have newspapers anymore. It's all, the Fourth Estate is not what it used to be. So when I was in college, I was putting myself through school doing heating and air conditioning for Sears.
Okay.
And when I got out, I could get a job at the Times, or the Hammond Times at the time, and it was $9 an hour, or I could continue working at Sears for $17 an hour doing heating and air conditioning. And I did that for about 15 years. I worked, my area was 79th Street in the city south, from the lakefront to Halsted. And I pretty much spent every day of 15 years driving around, fixing refrigerators, getting furnaces, air conditioners going, and all that stuff.
Are you a generally handy person still today?
Yes.
Yeah.
I prefer to tinker on things. Now, I mean, it's now computers and so forth, and a lot of it you don't give you the option to repair things, and I'm a big right to repair person. I think that people should have the right to fix the stuff they own, but now you've got so many companies that are denying you that ability and won't sell you parts and do all of those things. But that's a whole nother aspect of life.
Sure.
So I bought a business when I was in college called Roto Spray, and I ran it with my uncle, which is Debbie's father, my father, and myself. And
well, Debbie
Blank, I'm sorry. Yes.
Your cousin, right?
Cousin, yes.
Yeah.
And they were operating out of South Holland when they moved out here. Both of them moved out here in about 99, 2000, and moved Roto Spray out here. I bought a second business called XL Addenda that I operate out of my parents' basement. It gave me the ability to quit being refrigerator repairman, because after a while, those people tend to wear out their knees. You're on your knees all the time.
What was that second business?
XL Addenda. I modified switches. So a gentleman, I used to read the Chicago Tribune on Tuesdays and Sundays specifically for business opportunities. And a gentleman in Darien was selling his switch modification business. C&K went through we did a lot of work for them, and then they moved their whole company in 2004 to Costa Rica, which they offered me to go down there and bring my business down there, but the reality is I wasn't ready to go down there and possibly lose your business, and then you're just sitting in Costa Rica with nothing.
So that kind of end that business then?
It put a damper on it. I mean, I still ran it for a few years afterwards, doing lead tinning and trimming and so forth, but I went and got my appraisal license. And I wanted to be an appraiser because, I mean, back times is 2003, 4, everybody's selling houses. Every housewife is becoming a real estate agent. They're putting out their signs, and everybody sells houses. And you need appraisals to sell said houses. And the appraisal business was booming. One of my father's friends, now at the time, to get an appraisal license, you had to intern with an actual appraiser for a year. It wasn't now you have to get there's a college degree in it, but at the time you had to intern. And one of my father's friends happened to be the assessor here, and offered to take me on as an apprentice. actually never did the apprentice work. I started working for the assessor's office, and it was an interesting beginning and seeing the way that it was run.
Who was the assessor at that time?
Paul Ruff. I eventually defeated him in an election going forward. First day, he calls me into the office and he points up to 3 monkeys and he says, "This is you. I don't want you to hear nothing." And it was a hear nothing, see nothing, say nothing. And he looks at me and goes, "That's you. You don't hear nothing, you don't see nothing, and you don't say nothing." And I'm sitting back and I'm like, what? This is a job. This is not something, whatever, the mafia, whatever. He ended up getting sick. I took over the residential aspect. I worked on a whole project to take every single house in this township, take photographs of it, put it onto the website. And when he came back, people were like, "Oh, this guy Joe, he's really helpful and nice." And I got fired. And I think it was because he thought I was a threat. And I said, "All right, well, maybe I'll think of running." I didn't really think about running in politics for that point. I did. In 2009, I had acquired my credentials, got the signatures in 20-degree weather, or 20 degrees below weather, 2 weeks. The high temperature was -6, and I got all of my signatures, which of course got thrown out because my father, rest in peace, great guy, and on our petition sheets, I would go out with 15 names, or 15, blank spaces. And at the end of the night, I'd come home and there's only like 7. And I would just go out the next day with a blank one rather than trying to screw around. And in his infinite helping out, he took him to St. Mary's and had all the nuns sign. And unfortunately, I signed it as being the witness to those signatures. And so out of 3 of 56 petitions, I said I was the witness, that I wasn't, so they threw them all out for a pattern of fraud. And so I had to run as a write-in. It was a hard battle, but I got 6,000 write-in votes to his 3,000 not write-in votes. And for the first time in Illinois history, a city incumbent was beaten by a write-in.
Wow.
I don't have the most write-in votes. There was a guy in Peoria who was on the school board who got sick and didn't get his petitions in, and whatever. I don't care. None of that matters. But 6,000 people wrote my name down, and it's extremely motivating to do the best job possible. I mean, they didn't just go in and circle in an oval. They actually wrote the name down. And from that point,
how did you get to that point? How did you get 6,000 people to write your name in? What were you doing that election?
I grabbed every one of my friends that I'd ever met that sort of believed in me, and we manned every polling place. I didn't stop when they kicked me off the ballot. I just changed all of my signs to "Write in Joe Kral." I explained my situation. I had 20 coffees that I walked into neighborhoods and talked about how property taxes work and how when you elect somebody, they should be responsible to you, not above you. And that's, most of government this day, we elect people and like they're above us. No, they were just decided to do the service job that was needed.
Yeah.
It was
was the process different then? Because was there a primary? Did you go through a primary? Is that how?
This consolidated elections differ than general elections because there's normally a set primary. In this case, I ran as an independent. I didn't run as a Republican. I didn't run as a Democrat. I ran as an independent. He ran as a Republican, so he didn't get signatures. He just had a caucus to put him in. I collected signatures. Not primary, but actually for the election.
Tell us how you ended up in Mokena, or maybe you touched on that a little bit.
In 2003, my mother passed away. She had a battle of cancer, and my father, a pretty strong, stoic kind of a guy, I didn't think was handling it so well. Come home, dishes in the sink, been there for can't do this. And he needed that push. I was living in the city. I think I needed to start to grow up a little bit. Instead of having fun in the city and doing that, I moved back home and was working at the assessor's office full time. And it was 7 months later that I got fired. But I mean, sort of like you get into this grind of you're helping out and you're feeling motivated to accomplish something in government or something in any business, and you don't want to leave every day to drive an hour to come back an hour in the day. So sure. I moved home. It was a change. I hadn't lived at home for 15 years, and then you're home for a while, and that's how I moved to Mokena. Now, I mean, I've had ties here before. Even when I worked for Sears, I used to come back here in the 80s and the 90s, and to see where Mokena has grown is insane.
Yeah.
I know most of the people that are running for offices now worked on their campaigns even before I got involved in politics. I originally got involved in politics. They were trying to change the name of Mokena Junior High. And I didn't understand it because, I mean, he hadn't been superintendent for all that long, and they were going to change it for his name, and it was going to cost ungodly amounts of money, which didn't really make sense because I like Mokena Junior High. I mean, it's a
Who are they going to name it after?
I can't think of his name. He was the superintendent at the time,
Okay.
but I don't want to say what it was without knowing. It didn't pass, which was great because the cost that we incur for the services that we pay for keep going up. And if you keep inflating them even more than that, then they go up even higher, quicker, and that occurs. But
so
that's how I made it. That's how I got here.
Okay, and you're married and have a son. You want to talk about your family a little bit?
I'm married to Theodora Kral. She's the best decision I've ever made in my life. She keeps me grounded and tells me when I dress funny and don't look right and don't wear that jacket if you go on this show. And it just she did not like the sweater choice, but it is what it is. My son Joey is 10. He goes through Mokena Elementary Schools. He's tends to be older than his age, acts older, causes me more problems, getting a little wisecracky.
So what do you guys do for fun? What's fun for you guys?
We, as a family, my cousin Debbie and myself, we own a house in northern Wisconsin, Minocqua.
Oh, beautiful.
I love to fish. I like to golf. Not as much anymore with the kid because it's now function with the child, get the child out to do, the things that he has to do, and that tends to usurp my ability to go out and golf for 4 hours. And I wish golf took less time. If golf took 2 hours, I could get away with it, but it's not. It's 4 to 5 hours, and you got your family to deal with and the wife.
Well, something we did, we put our son in. I'm nowhere near a great golfer, but
neither am
I
I.
picked it up when I was younger, and I can go a couple times a year. But we did one of the golf class this past summer, with hopes, maybe in the next couple of years we'll get out there together because it is nice getting out on a course. And
I would love to go out with my boy and golf.
Yeah.
We put him in the Park District program a couple of
Okay.
times with golf. We tried golf lessons early, but it just didn't click. He's gotten into Taekwondo.
Oh, great.
So he's now a second degree black belt at 10. He's a member of their leadership team, which means that he actually teaches Taekwondo for, at the dojo. He's a member of their demonstration team, so he goes out and does all the tumbles and so forth. And
very cool.
He's gotten now into Muay Thai, which is kickboxing kind of a deal. So it gives him the confidence. He can do the splits. I don't even know. That didn't come out of my DNA. There's just no way. So
How funny.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, as we said when we got started, you don't have a challenger this election. Have you ever had a challenger since you ran?
I did the first 4 years. George Peros.
Okay.
Yes.
But one thing that we always hear when tax bills come out and the complaint you get is, Joe, why are you raising our taxes?
Nope.
And that's not the case, and that's kind of what we want to talk about tonight. Talk about the process, how it goes from your office to the tax bill that we get, and who all's involved in that. Let me start with kind of give everybody a general overview of a couple of the offices being. Start with the assessor. The job of the assessor to place a value.
So everything is based upon assessments. And now, what an assessment is 1/3 of your market value, or 33.33% of what your market value would be. What is market value? Market value is what a typical buyer would pay for your property in an arm's length transaction, unencumbered by a foreclosure, or it's your two relatives selling at each other. What would a typical buyer pay? Now, there's a second step down on that, in that I am limited by the Department of Revenue of the state of Illinois, and that number is telling me that I have to assess as of the first of the year, but utilizing data from not now, but 3 years before, the three preceding years. So assessments generally are lag behind.
So the assessor is going to place the value, like you said,
value on
you'll
the
use
property,
those.
yes.
Next, it would go to you submit your books to the supervisor of assessments. Is that right? The county?
In December, I get the book, it's called, and I have up until June. Actually, it started out July 4th, but now it's been moved up to like June 3rd or 4th.
Okay.
That I have to turn my book in, which is all the values of the township as of the first of the year.
And you give that to the supervisor of assessments, who is in the county, is over all of
Correct.
all of the townships.
All the townships, the whole county, yes.
And then so from that, the supervisor of assessments, what do they do next?
Well, they're going to total up the value of all of the property, all of the commercial, all of the industrial, all of the residential, and that becomes one number called the TAV, or total assessed valuation. Your assessment is a percentage thereof. And when you look at the other side of the tax bill, when you look at tax levy, each of those taxing bodies has a budget that they come up with, or they adjust according to PTEL. And then about 3 weeks before, actually probably not yet, right after the elections, by the way, is when the tax bills come out May 1st. About 2 weeks before, they take the levy and they compare it to what the total valuation is. And what number do I have to multiply the total valuation to equal the levy? That's called the tax rate. Everybody gets upset about tax rates. Tax rates are the number that makes it equal. It's not the tax rate, it's the levy from the taxing bodies that causes the pain of increased taxes. If I, as the assessor, raise everybody's assessment, let's say as the market has occurred 10% this last year, 10%. Everybody's value of their house is 10% higher. That will actually cause the tax rate to drop when they go to calculate it out to satisfy what the levy is.
Tell us the next step. So we have the tax rate is calculated. Does it go to the treasurer's office now to issue the tax bills?
Yes. The treasurer office issues the tax bills. The clerk's office is the one that then doles out the money as the tax. The treasurer collects the money, and then the clerk's office, through their tax, distributes those to the individual taxing bodies.
Great. So that, as I said, would give us a little bit of a overview of the general tax structure. Talk a little bit about your office uses something called mass appraisal, right? For most
It's
homes.
a CAMA system.
So talk about the data. You're looking at sales, as you said, from the previous 3 years.
Yes.
And that's largely for residential. And talk a little bit, you handle commercial property differently.
Commercial is generally based upon an income approach. So you're looking at how much income they're pulling in. If you go to frankfortassessor.com, you can put that up there. And you're a business. I was just actually in a business recently, and the guy's, well, what do I do about this? Actually, the Clancy's guy. And I'm like, well, you can go to our website and you can submit a rent roll to me that'll says what you're pulling in at rent. Then I can look at what a typical investor would expect from that kind of investment and use that to figure out what the price is. It's fun.
Sure. Talk about the process if a property owner disagrees with the values.
When I first came into office in 2010, we did not, the way the appeals, so like I get the assessments at the beginning of the year till June. I turn them in on August 1st. The supervisor of assessments sends out notices if there's been a change, or in a quadrennial sends out notices to everybody. So once every 4 years you always get a notice, which happened 2 years ago. And in otherwise you don't hear anything. You don't get that notice mailed if I haven't made any changes. Well, when you receive that change in August, that opens a 30-day window for you to file an appeal. If you disagree with what I say, you can go to the Supervisor of Assessments website, you file an appeal. Now, in 2010, when I was elected, I got a lot of appeals where people really didn't get what they were supposed to do. They would just turn in things that didn't make sense. Sometimes even when they had a case, they wouldn't submit the information that they did. And I found that odd that I wouldn't be speaking to somebody in the first 6 months that I was here. Why not sit down with you? And I started what I call a soft appeal. You can go to the website. I think our soft appeal opens up later this month. You would be able to provide me any information you want, and either you can just give it to me or send it in or email, or you can come in. And since 2010, I've met with 2,700 people,
Wow,
face-to-face, hour-long meetings talking about taxes and what causes them. The face-to-face meeting is great because I can pull up all of the data that I've got in my Canvas system, and I can show people where they're assessed in relation to their neighbors. When they tell me, well, my neighbor's paying this, and I can just pull up the thing. Well, no, he's not. This is what he's paying right here. Or sometimes if he is, we could say, well, why is that? And it's all about creating the fair burden, because the disconnect always comes when people say, well, you're just trying to protect money from the government. No, if I lower you, that doesn't mean that, that the fire department gets $1 less.
right.
It means that all of your neighbors make up for it in a higher tax rate.
One of the, I think, best analogies I ever heard to get that idea is there's the whole pie, and all those government taxing bodies are going to get their whole pie. And that tax rate just changes to determine how much of your pie, you're
Right.
contributing compared to the rest. So yeah, if somebody changes, the pie is the same. It's just shifting the responsibility.
Right. Well, and that goes both ways. Like if, we're in a time where properties are selling incredibly high. When 2007 hit and property values started to drop, your tax bill didn't go down. The tax rate just shoots up. And that's absolutely horrible for, a large segment of our population that are on the senior freeze. I mean, I was here in, 12, 13, and 14 when I'm cutting everybody's value by 5 to 7% a year. And all that did is they enjoyed the benefit of that at least decrease, even though the tax bills went up. But what it really slammed and hurt were seniors that were on the freeze. So like a senior, let's say they're 65 years, and at the time it was $50,000 a year, they're assessed at a much lower level. So when the overall value drops and that tax rate jumped through the roof, I had seniors who, they are literally stated that they make less than $50,000 a year and their tax bill went up $2,400.
Well, and that's a big misconception too, is people think the senior freeze is freezing your tax bill.
No,
but it's not. It's freezing your assessment.
Freezing your assessment, yes. And when it's very beneficial as property values increase, but it is exceedingly painful when the market turns. And I can't imagine. I mean, the market today, I can't explain it. I mean, I understand people have mortgages that are low and they don't want to sell, but some of the amount. I mean, we were doing every neighborhood had its highest house sale. You know, I mean, Grassmere, you know, house sells for $625,000. What? I mean, you know, it didn't. There's 325. You know, 5 years ago. What preceded that? But then a year later, you got 425 or 450. So I mean, it's all over the board, and
so let's talk. We're talking about the appeal process. So correct me if I'm off in a step of this, but as you said, soft appeals is the first step.
I would advise everybody to do a soft appeal.
Okay.
I mean, everybody that wants to do an appeal, first off, frankfortassessor.com, I think is one of the best websites of any assessor.
You can get so much information about your house.
Exactly.
That website,
you can pull that up. The first thing you want to look at is the sketch that's on there, the photograph of the house, which they're old, but I don't want to. I'm not paying for new photographs. And make sure that that's correct. Look at it, you know, say, oh, that looks relatively, you know, the way that it should be. If you have an area that's open to above, like let's say there's a 2-story dwelling and you got a large living room that doesn't show it on there, that would be something to talk to us about. Then get as much information as you can find. You can just, if you go to the search feature, you can just put the name in of your street and it'll pull up every house on your street. And you can go through and look at what they're assessed at. Now, I don't, it's hard to compare tax bills, but you can go to the treasurer's office too and pull up their actual tax bill. But some people have exemptions, some people have this.
Well, again, yeah.
Assessments are the way to go.
Yeah, sure.
And what we're mainly looking at is a price per square foot. So if you look at what your assessment is and you divide the number of square feet, it'll give you a price per square foot. And you want that to be commensurate with your neighbors that have the same house. It's my goal to say that, you know, if I'm valuing that 3-step ranch that's 2,400 square feet, looks like that 3-step ranch, because barring Butternut or, you know, Prestwick, most of the places that are built here are built by 1 or 2 builders in a subdivision. They build every house out pretty much the same as the whole neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And they should all be assessed. And that's one of the good things about changing CAMA systems at this late date is my predecessor was very big at really small neighborhoods. So like, you know, defining this area as a neighborhood, and people weren't allowed to look at sales elsewhere. But I wasn't allowed to look at sales elsewhere. Now I can expand neighborhoods, not just by name, but by house type and how well, you know, what the same type of houses, so that I get a bigger pool of data for sales.
So if, again, soft appeals, the next process would be a formal appeal with your office.
Well, formal appeal with that would be the board of
supervisor.
Review. The board of review.
Board of review, okay.
Yeah, that would be, you'd have to file through them. I would suggest going through me first. It would avoid a lot of hassle and trouble, and you would understand a lot more.
And then the last avenue after that is either the Property Tax Appeal Board or a circuit court.
If you lose at the Board of Review, you can file a PTAB and then circuit court, but that never really happens. PTAB is a state. We go to Springfield and go stand in front of lawyers. That
more of an administrative hearing process.
Yes.
Yeah. What should somebody that's considering buying or selling their home consider as far as property taxes go?
Look at the general neighborhood. You could go to our website. You could put in the street name that you're moving on. You could get a listing of PIN numbers in your area. You could look on the treasurer's website. I've actually reached out to the treasurer, try to link those things up, but that doesn't seem like it's going to happen. And look at what tax. One of the big problems, or one of the situations that I run into, is people come in and they say, well, my real estate person said it was going to be this. Your real estate person's trying to sell you a house. it would be best if you're buying a house to at least investigate what tax bills are, what they have been, and what in the future. Have we passed a referendum that says we're going to add 10%? You'd want to know that.
Yeah.
So, and if you call my office, we do the same. We'll look at it, give you at least a ballpark estimate of what it was, or we'll tell you what it was and a ballpark to what it will be.
So talk a little bit, you mentioned it, but the taxing bodies are what determine the overall tax amount. So how should we look at that, or how do we view that? The schools are a large portion, villages and that so on.
Governmental bodies are services. We pay for services. We pay for a police department that does our laws, a fire department that puts out our fires, a school that educates our children, a park district that runs our parks. We elect, in April elections coming up, the individuals that decide the budgets, the way that things, the way that money is spent. Every year, a taxing body is posed a question, generally around October, November, December, at their budgetary hearings. And they say, we can lower the levy, we can keep it the same, or we can raise it. Now, historically, in 1991, they passed a law called PTAL, Property Tax Extension Limitation Law. And a problem occurred that property taxes were jumping 15, 20% a year as the new school board comes in and says, we got to build this school, or the park district says, we got to build this park. And they said, we're going to have to figure out a way to limit this. So instead of them having an open checkbook to raise the value, whatever they could, they wanted to tie it to a defined inflation point. It's called the Consumer Price Index. That means that every year that your park district or your fire department went in to do the budgetary, they could lower their budget to keep it the same, or they could raise it limited by PTAL. Whoever that guy that wrote PTAL was actually put a limiter. It's either the inflation rate or 5%, which is ever lower. And thank God. I mean,
because otherwise they have to go and ask for it to the voters.
If they want more money, they have to file a referendum. And that's why whenever you see the word referendum, generally it works with an increase to your levy, your budget. And that's where you get the breakdown between, say, 159 and 161. They have had 7 referendums, and we've had 4. We only passed 1. They passed all 7. Now, what does that mean? That means that the same house on Everett, where Mr. Benny's is, that street, the exact same valued house on either side of the street, their tax bill on the east side of the street is $1,000 higher.
Wow.
And that's just, and that's, I mean, it's a...
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good highlight of, the same value.
Yeah.
So, again, it's extremely determined by where you are. That's right across the street.
How many of the service providers that you have and what they're charging you to give you that service? Taxing bodies operate in the same way that your IRA is such a great benefit for you to save money. The reason that an IRA is a great benefit is it's compounding interest. So every year you compound on not only the principal, but the interest. Governmental budgets are the exact same way. You take last year's budget and you increase it by a percentage. It just keeps getting bigger, and then the percentages get bigger. Even that 1% increase from 15 years ago is now about a 7% increase, just because of the way that you passed the referendum, and it doesn't stop.
And that is one of the key reasons, I wanted to do this, and with us as well as the whole thing is those people that were voting on those school boards, and all the things that we make up our tax bill. And so it is important to know who those people are. Because that's that has a significant direct impact on each of us as residents.
I mean, just comment. First off, there's the other way, which is absolutely just as bad, of coming in and cutting everything. The reason people move here is because of our school system. You need to fund them. Now, electing people to park district boards and school boards and fire protection boards that think about the tax ramifications is probably an important thing too. Mm-hmm. And, can you get the best for the dollar as opposed to just spending more? And more money doesn't automatically mean better service. It just means that you're paying more money. And in some cases, the outcome is less when you're paying more.
I want to do a little, we've covered a lot of these, but do a little quick vocab of some of the terminology we've gone over. So first, assessed value.
1/3 of market value being what somebody would pay for in an arm's length transaction.
Okay, next one was market value. So we got that one taken care of. What is the equalization factor?
The Department of Revenue has a valuation. They look at every single sale and compare it to where I am. And that gives them an idea of where I am in relation to value. And so they will say, Joe, you're, 6% low. And you could make changes, and I go make changes, and then they will apply 6% to everybody to bring the value up to that level. And it's actually, if you have a fairly assessed system, the equalization factor, all that does, and it doesn't change the tax bills, it just changes value up and down.
Talk about what is the quadrennial reassessment.
So every 4 years, I'm required to look at property throughout the township, every property, to make sure that we have particulars. The quadrennial is the year that you get sent out all of the notices that say what your value is and what changes. It actually occurs every year. We make adjustments every year. The quadrennial is just the year that statutorily they have to send out letters.
And then, again, just explain what the levy is.
The levy is the taxing bodies, the services that you are receiving from taxing bodies. It's their bill to say, this is what we want you to pay.
Okay.
It's about assessments. And if I was to say anything to the people out there, if you wanted to talk about assessments or look at your assessment, set up a soft appeal. Bring in as much information or as little information as you want. I generally book the appointments for about an hour, and we go through and we talk about your house, your neighbors' houses, anybody's house you want to bring up, what they're paying.
And if you provide us, we'll put the website on, and if the soft appeal dates, if you want to give us that, I'll make sure to share that as well, so people can reach out to your office.
Yet, but I think it's the 20th.
Okay, yeah, whenever that comes out, if it's even after the video, we'll be sure to share those dates for people so they can come out and talk to you. All right, so I just want to end with kind of a quick round of some lighter questions for you. Let you off the hook on the easier way out. So the theme of our podcast is history and community. If you were talking to a new resident, new person coming into town, what advice would you offer them to get involved and feel connected within our community?
Join a group. Whether it's the Cub Scouts or if you have kids with Cub Scouts. I'm actually trying, there's the Toastmasters in Frankfort that I think I might want to get involved with.
Yeah, they're great.
But to learn to speak better, like you. So you're so bad sitting get involved. Show up to events. Show up to board meetings. And just listen to what goes on. Ask questions. Be nice. And you'll get a feeling of the way that the community operates. And it's all about community. It's all about your neighbors, whether they're Republican or Democrat or anything else. It doesn't matter. It's being present in your community and supporting the people around you.
Speaking of meetings, when does the township have their board meetings?
The second Monday of the month. Nobody shows up to township meetings.
Well, that's why we'll put it out there, and if anybody wants to come check it out.
It's actually, as you saw in the previous one, that food pantry, I Mike Hilton was a guy that was working and he worked for, I believe, Jewel. And when he came to work for the food pantry, he set up all these absolutely incredible, stop by Jewel or Burkott's and pick up, meat and produce. And that thing has grown and grown and grown. And I think it's like the best food pantry in the Southland. And people talk about it. And it actually I'll sit and have conversations with seniors that come in that can't, like, I can't afford to live here anymore, Joe. And I'll be like, listen, I know it's not what you want to do. And they get really, this is not the charity I want. But let's go down to the food pantry. And I take them down there and introduce them to Steve and say, hey, this person, and you imagine what it'd be if you didn't have to pay for 2 bags of food a week.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the difference between people's living here or not living here.
I learned so much by going around with Supervisor Nick George, and just what the township offers. It's really insightful because it really does help a lot of the people that, especially that need help with the senior housing and all that.
It's the government for the areas that don't have a villager.
What is your favorite area restaurant?
I had something Saturday that was probably one of the best things that I've eaten in a couple of years, and that was a crepe at that crepe place.
Really? Okay.
It was
amazing. I haven't been
yet. It was a chicken Alfredo with broccoli, spinach.
Wow.
And this guy, we went in there. My wife had gone to Governor's State with my son to see a shadow performance where they're doing shadow something, whatever. America's Got Talent, they were the winners, whatever. But she's like, well, we'll meet here. And everybody was supposed to meet there. And it was just us and the family. And I sat down and talked to this guy. He actually had an assessment question. So when I was at the office today, I picked up some papers. I dropped them off there. Great people. Great. And
nice.
Anytime you open up a restaurant, it's a hard business to open up. But it was great. It was fantastic. Other than that, what's the mom and pop place here on...
Peppermill?
Peppermill, yeah.
You're the second person that's given Peppermill as an answer.
I love Peppermill. Peppermill's great. I mean, Peppermill's the kind of place you can go and be, that is, I'm not the fancy food. My kid is the fancy food. My wife likes to go out.
I love a good breakfast.
We went to some Greek place in Oak Brook, and you spend, $200 on food, and you're stuffed, but you go to Peppermill and you're just as stuffed, and you get home in 15 minutes.
Sure.
So it's nice.
If you could master one skill, what would it be?
Public speaking.
Huh. Toastmasters. There you
I know. I literally have sometime, I think it was like in November, and I was like, I should go there and just to sit down and just to learn, some of the things that I never picked up in public speaking. And I've always, and I'm thrust in this job to speak publicly. And I just do it Socratically because I don't really know any other way, and I'm not going to develop speeches on this, and maybe I should, but to convey the information that overall the assessments are, your percentage of the total valuation, and it's the levy that's caught,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you could only watch one TV show for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I love Parks and Recreation.
That's a good one.
It's from a government
especially
standpoint.
From a government perspective, yeah.
I mean, I watched. In fact, I was just watching it with my child. We were having some discussions, and he's like, "You're Ron Swanson," and I'm like, "Well, I do follow a lot of what he says, and but I mean,
I always loved The Office, but because I worked for Cook County for a long time, and
where at?
The Board of Review.
Did you really?
Yeah. And watching Parks and Rec after having that experience was like, this is amazing.
So you work for the Board of Review?
Yeah. So if you came with a warning label, what would it be?
Don't talk to me during Bears games.
That's a good one.
I mean, we're just having the discussion with the wife, and she was for Super Bowl, and she's like, I don't want to talk to you around games because you get so upset. And I'm like, the last time that this occurred was she walked downstairs just as the Bears had the Hail Mary thrown against them. Literally 30 seconds later, she's like, how's your game? I'm like, it sucks. I'm just very upset. She's like, I don't want to talk to you when you're, I'm like, I was so upset. But I mean, that was the start of the downfall.
Sure. Yes. If somebody came to Mokena for the first time to visit, where would you take them?
Front Street. I think as far as a community goes, and this is, I don't, the whole mayoral race, and I'm not talking about any of that. That is such an underutilized strip of land that I think that if I brought somebody in, I would be like, hey, what would go good here? What would be the business on this street? I mean, you have a captive audience getting off the train every day and getting on the train every day. And you could, that's why Annie's Cucina, when it failed, I mean, I couldn't figure that out. Because, that would be like the perfect, get off the train, buy your meatball sandwich and go home. Right. It didn't make sense that it didn't survive.
What is your favorite Mokena community event?
I really have grown to like the food trucks. Yeah. I think that it's a great community event. So, we talk about community and bringing people together, and it's not about, you're this or you're that. It's that we're all members of this community. That's a great place. I go there, you sit and you talk to people around, you wave, that's a good community event.
Yeah.
And it's well attended, and,
very well.
Melissa does a great job. It just, good job.
It's inspiring to see. Like, it really shows that people want to have something to do in downtown Mokena.
Well, and and that, once again, downtown Front Street. And it just, for years, Dave's Auto was Tribes. And, I get my car fixed there and talk to Dave and Shar. And now it's Tribes. And then they didn't sell food. And it was part of the TIF district. And I don't think he understood what TIF district meant, because he thought he was going to make a lot. No, that's just not the way a TIF district works. And you need to raise the value up. But I'm like, no, it has to be commensurate with the other properties around. This is prime real estate for commercial that brings people in, that gets, and you can't beat there's parking there. It's, slide in and out.
Joe, anything else that you want to share before we wrap it up?
April elections are important. You're going to be able to meet your school board candidates, your mayoral candidates, your trustee candidates. Get out and meet them. Just talk to them. They'll be fighting each other, but you as a voter need to look past that and look to who you want to support because you trust them to do it. And then when you do vote for them, continue to make sure that they're doing what they said they were going to do. Not anything specific to the mayoral candidates, but any elected official. And make sure that they're providing you the service that you are electing them to do. When it comes down to it, you want your fires put out and your criminals arrested and your laws being followed and permits not being exceedingly expensive. And I wish government would be more active doing what they're supposed to do.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We'll share your website as well as the dates of the soft appeals when you share that with us. And then make sure to check out all of our candidate interviews on our website. And early voting starts on March 17th and election day is April 1st. Thanks, Joe.
All right. Thank you.